Hey, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of Christmas Culture Club. I'm Julie.
And I'm Steve.
And guess what? It's Christmas Eve. And thank you so much for joining us for this entire Christmas journey. This is our first year. I have to say, we've had an absolute blast, but we're not done yet.
No.
And today, being Christmas Eve, it's an important day. This is kind of the highlight.
Yeah.
So, Steve, what is the key element to Christmas in the United States?
Well, okay. So obviously, the single most important aspect of it is the religious part, the birth of the Christ child, the celebration of the Nativity. But from a cultural perspective, there's only one answer, and that's the big jolly elf in the red suit who comes down the chimney and delivers the presents. Good old Saint Nick, aka Santa Claus.
Yes, very cool. I am completely wholeheartedly agree with that. And how did we get there? How did it happen? I mean, I don't know. What do you know about it?
Well, of course, we talked in the past about several episodes ago that it all began with Saint Nicholas of Turkey, and it's evolved over time to what it is from today. But you actually have some pretty good information about the influence of the British upon the story of Christmas and Saint Nick Santa.
Yeah, so this episode we're going to talk specifically about the United States version of Santa. And culturally, I think it's kind of spread across the world and we've talked about Christmas around the globe. What does it look like? But we're going to focus on how did it develop here in the United States? And it's got kind of a fascinating history. So, if you haven't read it, probably you haven't. There's a book called The Battle for Christmas.
Scoot it over just a little bit, Julie.
There you go. So it is actually a phenomenal book. It was the runner up to the Pulitzer Prize, and it is about the history of Christmas in the United States. So there's a whole chapter on how do we go from a Turkish bishop to a Dutch influenced Sinterklaas to Santa Claus as we know it, essentially created by a British elitist group of historians in New York City in the 1820s. Like, it is a pretty crazy,
That's
like,
a long
movement.
journey.
It's a long journey in a really short period of time, and it was actually very manipulated, I guess. I mean, that's got kind of more of a negative connotation, but essentially what happened is, when we talked about the origin of Christmas, and then we've talked about kind of the Christmas Carol at the time in, like, Dickens, Victorian England, and then that came over to the United States. Christmas was a time of misrule. It was a time of a break for servants and workers. There was actually really high unemployment at the Christmas season. So people were off, probably drinking. A lot of people were just going around and making merry, which can oftentimes tip the scales into maybe we're going to, rattle some cages. And during this era, so we're talking about right about the turn of the 19th century, so like early 1800s, New York was a rapidly growing city. And you had people that were, the city itself was still confined to southern Manhattan. And the wealthy were escaping what was becoming very populated areas. So they're moving uptown. I mean, if you know Manhattan well, we're only talking about 20, 30 blocks. And they had these estates that now took up a block or two of what we're familiar with New York City. And on Christmas, all the way through New Year's, people, like these bands of kids, essentially would come around, knock on doors, demand, kind of either pennies, or they demand mead, they demand alcohol, they demand jokes, So this is, again, something that we saw within Victorian England, and it was happening in the United States. But it kind of got out of hand. And there were actually riots that were happening. I mean, if anybody's familiar with like Devil's Night in Detroit, similar situation. I mean, there's property damage, and there was a lot of class strife at this time. You had very, very wealthy, and then you had very poor people, and there was not a lot of in between. The gap was really big. So there's one person that's kind of key to this story. And he was one of the wealthy. He actually founded the New York Historical Society, and he was part of a group called the Knickerbocker Club. And the Knickerbockers were all the elite of New York City. They were really fascinated with the history of New York City. And they actually started saying, like, okay, how can we let these poor people blow off steam and celebrate a holiday?
Before you continue, I want to stop for a second. So right now, Julie's describing the upper class echelon of New York City and their beautiful studios. And if you're watching us on YouTube, Julie has positioned herself in this big, beautiful overstuffed leather chair in her red Christmas Culture Club shirt with a Christmas tree behind her and a beautiful fire going in the fireplace.
All right,
She is the
fine.
epitome
So
of what she's talking about.
I belong to the Knickerbocker group. You've spotted me out. I've now like been betrayed, whatever. And you know
I'm
what?
sorry. I
No,
digress.
it is fairly appropriate. Anyway, so John Pritchard was the guy who he's kind of the center of this group. And it's interesting because he was actually behind the founding of 4th of July. He
Oh,
was
really?
behind the founding of Columbus Day, Washington's birthday. So, I mean, he was kind of a power player, but typical for that society at the time, he was pretty quiet about it. Like, I think history has not really remembered him much, but there's a lot of his papers. He was an avid letter writer. So, anyway, he's got this group of people. One of the people is Washington Irving. Washington Irving is a huge writer of the time, actually created this essentially a magazine. It's almost kind of the Onion
Hmm.
esque, that it was almost satirical and was posting all of these different short stories. And there were a number of short stories that were about Christmas, but not Christmas as we knew it. It was more about Dutch Christmas, Santa Claus, the concept of St. Nicholas Day, actually. And in 1822, that was when the poem The Visit from St. Nicholas actually was published. At
Hey,
the time twas the night before
there
Christmas.
you go.
So it was
Mm.
published anonymously, and there's still question marks. Now, what I've read does actually there is now someone who is attributed as the author, and he's a member of the Knickerbocker group. But people thought maybe it was Washington Irving at the time. The gentleman's name is Clement Clark Moore, and so Clement Clark Moore he wrote it for his daughter,
Mm.
and this one poem. We talk about A Christmas Carol all the time on this show, but this one poem is what really does set the stage for what becomes Christmas celebrations in America. It takes a bit of a leap from, A Christmas Carol and how the English were celebrating and the early Dutch settlers of New York, how they had been celebrating, and brings it to the New World and adds the suit, adds the beard, adds the jolly personality, adds the wisdom. There was actually a lot about books originally, but it also then shifted everything from St. Nicholas Day to Christmas Eve. Prior to this point, the letters that we have from John Pritchard were that Christmas Eve and Christmas Day were very introspective. They were spiritual. They were days of worship. It was a day to be quiet and really
Contain.
reflect. And because we had this class strife going on, they decided that how can we channel this energy into something more positive? And Christmas is what essentially presented itself as this means of being a more positive way. And Pritchard, going back to his letters, we have letters starting, about 1828 to 1832, talking about Christmas, talking about the stockings hung by the fire, talking about, some of the German traditions of the Christmas tree didn't really start at that time, but gift giving. It's just amazing how one poem really captured the essence of what Christmas in America and Santa Claus in America is. Again, going from a bishop that was handing out, shoes and clothing to the poor in Turkey, taking a little bit of spice from Dutch Sinterklaas and then, wrapping it up into the magic of wanting to balance class warfare. So
Mhm.
it's a pretty interesting journey. I was fascinated reading about it, and there's a lot of historical fact about how this actually change happened.
Mhm. Sure, sure. I think part of the things that we look at is the evolution of Santa. How does he become who he is? As you're talking about the look, the appearance. We talked at one point in time about Thomas Nast's
Mhm,
drawings, the artist Thomas Nast during the Civil War. It was actually propaganda, but his 1863 drawing kind of establishes the Santa that we see today in the red suit, evolved away from the brown suit of earlier
mhm.
custom. He also, I guess, he created the concept of the North Pole, the elves workshop. So really, a lot of what we perceive as the custom of Saint Nick Santa Claus was pushed forward by Thomas Nast.
Well, and one thing I love about him is because it was during the Civil War, like the first drawing that he did of Santa Claus was Santa Claus wearing a stars and stripes suit. And he was giving out gifts to Union soldiers because, like you said, it was propaganda. And the Library of Congress, you can actually Google Library of Congress, Thomas Nast, Santa, and it will pull up his 1863 drawing. And it was in Harper's, which was a magazine at the time, very influential magazine at the time. And he was an illustrationist. And, it's not to say that he didn't have inspiration. It's kind of like the melting pot that America was. How does everything come together at this one moment of time where you have the Dutch settlers of New York, you have the British settlers, you've got the Germans that have come over, you've got the concept of Odin flying across the sky that we talked about very
Right.
early on, that came from the Norwegian and Scandinavian settlers. So you have all of this, like all of these ingredients in the pot, and suddenly you add the American experience,
Pulls it all
and
together.
out comes this man.
Sure.
But going from Washington Irving, like, era, 1820s, 1830s Santa, they hadn't really made him, like, jovial at that time. He wasn't portly, like, he did have the beard, but he was a little bit more aesthetic and still kind of looked more serious, more bishop-like.
Well, Nast also kind of responsible for the kids writing letters to the North Pole Santa, the elves workshop, the gift giving, collating the presents and delivery and all. But the real Santa that we see today is, comes from the one of our favorite beverage makers of all time,
I
right?
should have I want a Coke all of a sudden really bad right now. Why did I not stock beverages? Oh, wait, but I do have my special left-handed Santa mug that my husband bought because I get to finally see Santa's face.
Hmm.
I can hold him in my left hand and I can admire his beautiful, bearded, jovial face.
I have the exact same mug, and I won't drink from it except on Christmas Eve.
This baby gets use.
Does
This
it?
one, like the 4 weeks, I mean, it's hand wash only. It's
Oh yeah,
very,
yeah. You can't put
very,
anything else.
very well loved, but
Mhm.
yes, it's usually hot cocoa. Tonight it's peppermint tea.
Oh,
So,
nice, nice.
yeah. But
Uh,
anyway, I
but
digress.
yes,
Well, I
Champagne
admire Santa's
Coca-Cola.
face. Yes. Coca-Cola. I mean, it's amazing, how, again, like you have these things that Santa feels so timeless for us. And I mean, it's 2025. 1820 is a ways away or a while ago. Coca-Cola, same thing. I mean, we're really looking at, I think it's like 18 or 1901, 19, I forget what year it was. But, that didn't really happen until the 1930s
Mhm.
when the illustrator for Coca-Cola had taken inspiration from Thomas Nast illustrations and he started using those as basis for Coca-Cola ads. That concept of nostalgia. I mean, even at that point, you're looking at something that's, 30, 40 years in the history. I mean, that feels like ancient times now. I mean, that's the
100
80s for
years
us
ago.
at this
Yeah,
point. Yeah.
yeah.
But I was really fascinated by, like, department store Santas, of course.
Macy's.
Yes, Macy's, but so we have good friends that live in Brockton, Massachusetts. As I was digging into this, I did not realize the very first department store, the very first person that is credited as dressing up like Santa at a store to bring people in was, let me see. Edgar's department store in Brockton, Massachusetts is
Uh-huh.
considered the first person to dress like Santa, and it was in 1890.
Wow.
So, I mean, Coca-Cola didn't really manipulate their images and start creating that nostalgia until the 1930s.
Mhm.
So you have these kind of timelines that are running concurrently that are all connecting to come into kind of current culture. So
Well, I think Macy's probably took it and ran with it, right?
oh yeah,
They were,
absolutely.
the largest, well, they and Gimbels. Macy's ran with it. Gimbels came up and competed with them. Have you ever been to New York during the Christmas season, which I think you have. I've been a number of times. You go into Macy's and wow, the Santa display was amazing. And I think I think they pushed the commercialization of Santa probably harder than any other commercial venture out there. And to the point, I mean, for the longest time, department stores are kind of becoming a thing of the past, it seems. You know, you got more and more specialized stores, malls. Before the advent of the mall that was constructed under one roof, you had these massive strip centers with rows and rows of stores, and there was always a Santa village back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And then with the advent of the malls, the indoor malls,
Mhm.
they took it in there. And for the longest time, the department stores themselves, every department store had a Santa Claus,
Yeah.
not the real one, but
Yeah.
one of
He's
Santa's helpers.
busy.
That's
He's
right.
up at the North Pole building toys,
Yep.
he's got the elves working, but everybody wants to engage in that cheer. And
Mhm.
now it's interesting. I feel like one of the more popular places to go and see Santa is Bass Pro. And, I mean, last year we had German friends stay with us for 2 weeks. They have little kids. We made the trek out to Bass Pro, because, I mean, where else, like, who else has a good Santa? I do feel like now Santa brunches are very popular.
Mhm.
I feel like that's kind of taken the place of, hey, I mean, when I was a kid, we went to Marshall Fields, here in Chicago, and we would go and get pictures with Santa up until the age where I revolted and said, no more, So,
We had a picture when I was 5 or 6 years old, was taken at one of these shopping center Santas, and myself, my sister Sherry, my sister Sandy, we were featured on our Cincinnati Enquirer, with a
nice.
picture with Santa. And somewhere I've got a copy of my mom saved a copy and sent it to me, and it's in one of my boxes somewhere of us with Santa. It was in the mid '60s. I
That's
mean,
very
mid
cute.
'80s, when I was a kid in mid '80s. Anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, now, like, I actually had somebody give me grief the other day. So I have two dogs. They are currently lounging just off scene, and right now they're behaving. But I've never taken them to get photos with Santa.
Yeah.
And somebody was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, you spoil your dogs. You've never taken them to get them photos with Santa."
But
I feel like,
do you have them in as an ornament?
yeah,
Okay, very
come
good.
on now. I mean, this tree behind me, so legit, if the house burned down, the ornaments would be what I would save. Like the humans and the animals, but the ornaments would be what? Like my mother has given me an ornament every year of my life. It is every single ornament on this tree has a story, and it is so personal to me. It's one of my favorite things to do is to put the ornaments on the tree. So
Next year, you gotta take the dogs and get their picture with Santa.
it might have to happen this year. I don't know. I mean, it depends on what the weather happens. We've
Mhm.
got more snow now than we've had
Well,
in common air.
as it's Christmas Eve, you're about to run out of time.
Hey, well, yeah, he's busy. He's taken off. So yeah. Anyway,
So anyway,
it's interesting to see, how we've kind of gone through this arc of department store Santas. We had the representation of Santas in ads. And I feel like the nostalgia came back and reconnected with that like these Coca-Cola Santa. And now I feel like that's become the Santa that we look at, like the Santa that we think.
except this movement these days to make the sexy Santa. All the
You've been watching too much Hallmark Channel.
No, 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 I'm talking about commercials. There are so many commercials with this svelte, sexy Santa. I'm going, "What? That's not."
Interesting. I don't know that I've seen these. What channels are you watching,
This is
Steve?
I
I'm a little
mean,
curious.
these are there's a commercial for. It's like, have you been naughty or nice as these sports figures and Santa's, he's got the trim beard and the
The
2025 haircut, and it's like, what in the world's going on here? He's the jolly old elf with the belly,
yeah.
but
I
I
have to say, I think my favorite current iteration of Santa is Goldie Hawn and Kurt, what is it?
Kurt
Not
Russell,
Kurt Russell. I think that he did a good one. I have to say John Travolta right now is doing a good one in the Grease Lightning.
right?
That I think there's some humor behind it, but I love that. I forget what the movie was. If it was Christmas Chronicles, I think that it
Mhm.
was the Goldie Hawn, Kurt Douglas, or Kurt Russell. They did like their own photo shoot, and their personal Christmas card that year was of the two of them dressed up like Mrs. Claus and Santa
Uh-huh.
Claus. I just think that that's a pretty humorous tie-in. It's just curious to see like how Santa does actually change appearance wise over the
Mhm.
seasons. But again, we started out with a skinny man, scrawny beard, like bedraggled robes to, the cookies, gotta have a belly, rosy cheeks. And, now it's like reflecting the times that, we want him to be a little bit more, able to handle that sleigh for the 24 hours that it takes to fly around the world and, get all the presents to all the kids everywhere.
There's a really sweet movie, it's an animated film called Arthur Christmas,
Mhm.
and it's about the family, the Santa family, and how, Santa passes down from generation to generation, and it's interesting to see. It's a beautiful, sweet, fun animated film, and I recommend it to everybody. But it's interesting to see their concept of the evolution.
Yeah.
It's also, 2 fairly recent films. David Harbour's in one, and I forget the name. It's a very violent film, but it harkens back to the origin of Santa being
Mhm.
essentially a Viking.
Yeah.
Um, and, he's become immortal, and he gives gifts, and then there's just a couple years, I think it was last year or year before last, there's one on Prime Video that was made for Prime called Red One, where, with The Rock as Santa's chief of security, and Santa gets kidnapped, and it's, Santa's, he's not girthy at all. He's,
He's a buff dude.
yeah, very buff. So, but anyway,
Nice. Well, what does Santa mean to you? Like, what does he represent?
obviously, I think the first 2 things that come to mind are generosity, and not just by way of gifts, but generosity of spirit, the kindness. I always had an issue with the naughty and nice list because in my impression of Santa, every child, there may be issues, but every child's nice
Uh-huh.
at home, and that Santa brings that out. So I think for me, generosity of spirit and kindness.
Did I have to agree that it's the uniting of the community, it's the kindness, just sharing the kindness of the world. Someone who puts himself or themselves in service of others and is just sitting here creating magic. And I mean, magic is something that's very important to me. I love Polar Express. I
Yeah.
love The Bell. I love believing. There's so much in this world that we can't see, we can't explain, but I believe, and that belief really carries through, and it's what I love about the Christmas season is
Mhm.
that people are typically at their best selves. I did have a conversation with a customer yesterday who was saying that, his wife is super stressed out this time of year and he feels like they fight more often. And it's tough to manage the stress of the season. I mean, sure, I'm sitting in this chair and it's a very iconic scene, but it took a lot of work to make this. It's a personal drive for me and it's something that I very much enjoy to create. And I enjoy sharing it with others. We host a lot and it just makes me happy to open our home and do the experiences of Christmas. I don't consider myself a good gift giver, but I love creating magic and creating experiences and creating shared times with other people. And that's, I think, something that Santa brings.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's truly the essence of
Mhm,
Santa. Whether you believe in Santa as a real person, or if you see the ethereal aspect of Santa,
mhm,
that's the thing behind it. And I think, this whole program, or this, the whole Christmas Culture Club is about the cultural aspects of Christmas, but it really does harken back to the spiritual aspect of Christmas too. The decency and all the what the Christ child embodies or
mhm.
should embody in humanity, and Santa as a reflection of that. So, yeah, I think.
Well, and I did love when I interviewed Danny from Germany for the Christmas Around the World episode. It was very interesting to me, and I mean, I've lived in Germany, like, consider myself pretty familiar with the culture, but when she said that traditionally the gifts were given by the Christ child, and now with kind of the presence of American Santa, the culture had to update and say, well, the Christ child, there's so many people in the world, the Christ child needed help, and Santa is that helper. And I love that explanation. I think it's a very nice package. I like the way it works.
There's a really beautiful animated film called, I think, Santa Claus is Coming to Town. It's a Rankin Bass film, and they don't specifically state that in there, but I think they kind of allude to that. If I think I'm
Mhm.
remembering the right animated film, and you kind of go, "Oh, wow, okay."
It makes perfect
Ooh,
sense,
yeah.
you know? And I mean, again, it comes back to this concept of you cannot see everything that we believe,
Mhm.
but we can believe what we can't see, you know? So I just a magic. I believe in magic, you
Well,
know, and I want magic to live in my heart, in my home, in my Christmas celebration, you know. So it's yeah, it's a good thing. So I don't know, but it's getting late on Christmas Eve.
yep, which is a perfect lead into my story. We talked about this, I think, one of the first 2 episodes.
Yeah, the intro episode, you alluded.
Yes, people talk about the impact of Santa on their lives, and as a child, the year that they realize that sometimes they're not seeing the real Santa, but they're seeing a Santa's helper, right? So when I think I was 10. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the western suburbs, actually a little city outside on the western suburbs called Cheviot. And every year on Christmas Eve, they did a Christmas parade, and Santa was at the end of it. Well, my Uncle Walt, my dad was a baby of 15 kids. My Uncle Walt owned a delicatessen called Glengate Delicatessen on the corner of Glenmore and Applegate, Glengate Delicatessen. Every year they sold Christmas trees. And on Christmas Eve, German family, big baby of 15, my dad, and brothers would kind of work part time for Michael Walt. And at the holidays, they would sell the trees. And on Christmas Eve, they would take the leftover trees and ornaments, and they created food baskets for for the poor families, or the families in need in Chevy at the time. And they would close up the deli at 2 o'clock, I think. And my dad and my uncles would load up their cars and their trucks, and they would deliver and drop all these things off. And so they weren't home when my mom, we lived about 2 blocks off of the main drag in Cheviot, right? And my mom would take me and I think at that time there were 4 of us, me, 2 sisters, and my baby brother, up to the main drag to watch the parade. And then while we were gone, my dad and my Uncle Lou, who was single, would come into the house. They'd finish up coming into the house, and they would put out our Christmas presents so that, they were all out ready, and that at, overnight Santa would deliver his, but these would be the family Santa presents, right? Well, I was at the age where I was having my doubts. The school kids, I think, was in 3rd grade, 4th grade, something like that. And, the kids are all talking about, there's no Santa. Well, there's Santa. So I asked my mom and dad, is there a Santa Claus? And they wanted me to continue to believe, and I do, for a little while longer. So my Uncle Lou had acquired a Santa suit. And my Uncle Lou was skinny as can be, thin guy. So of course they had to pat him up. 2 other quick insert points. One, we had a home that we lived on the 2nd floor of the house, and it was back in the days. It was a brick house that the 2nd floor had a walkout kind of patio with a brick railing around it, so you could sit out on the patio, and their big front porch, and that's people knew
Mhm.
each other, right? So they concocted this idea that they would be waiting for us. And as my mom brought us in and we're coming up the stairs, my mom would say something to the effect of, you kids better be quiet and settle in. Santa's going to come. My Uncle Lou would come out with a ho, 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 ho. We'll go through the living room, open the French doors, go out on the patio, climb over the brace, and then shimmy down the posts, dump the Santa Claus outfit, and come back in.
Oh my god.
Okay. The key to this is we're German. And what do Germans like to do when they're having fun? Drink beer. So they're delivering the packages. My mom takes us, and they're drinking as they're delivering things. And I'd say they tipped one too many Hootiples. That was a famous Cincinnati brewery. We come back. My mom on cue. We're going up the steps. Mom's dragging us up the steps, and my mom very loudly goes, "You kids better settle down. We have to get you up and get to bed. Otherwise, we're going to miss Santa Claus." And on clue, you hear ho 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 ho.
Oh my
Boom,
god.
like 15 out on tour, and there's on his back with his arm
Oh,
twisted behind his back, the beer's up over his head, the pillow and all the stuff had fallen out. He fell and broke his arm.
oh my god.
So here we are on Christmas Eve. The neighbors are watching me and my siblings as my mom drives my drunken dad and uncle to St. Francis Hospital to get his arm set in a cast.
Aw, bless his heart. And there you go.
So there we
That
go.
that's how you found out that there were helpers in the world.
That's right. No good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah.
But we've had a chuckle about that. This was many, 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 many years ago.
Yeah.
It's one of those core memories. I mean, I still distinctly remember, and I asked my mom years ago, I said, Mom, am I recreating some of this? Is some of this just imagination?" She goes, "No."
Yeah.
So she said, "I still hear the ringing of him going, 'Whoa!' over the railing."
It's like he only broke his arm, man. Jeez.
You know what? I'm
That's an
thinking
intense
alcohol
fall.
may the alcohol may have actually helped.
Bless him. That's awesome. Yeah,
Anyway.
when my husband first it was our first Christmas together, and my dad used to dress up for kids in the neighborhood, like one family in particular. They had a Santa costume. And for whatever reason, my dad couldn't do it. And, Ryan and I were like puppy love at that time. The poor man would do anything to impress. And he's like, "Yeah, sure. I'll dress up like Santa." Put on this ill-fitting old costume. I mean, this thing had seen much, much better days. And I mean, we were walking down the street to go over to this house. He's like, "What am I doing?" When his friends found out he dressed up like Santa, they're like, "This man is in love with a capital L." So,
Mhm.
because I mean, we were talking about it. He's not he was a single guy. Like, he didn't celebrate Christmas that much. There wasn't a lot. He didn't have a Christmas tree. And like our first Christmas together, I showed up at his house one day and brought over this scrawny little portable tree, a single strand of lights, and he's like, "Okay," and now look at us. I mean,
Yeah.
he spent 3 hours hanging a sleigh off the front of our house that flies just to make magic for me and just to put a smile on my face, so, pretty
Well,
lucky woman.
isn't that and that's kind of the essence of it, right? I mean, the whole concept of Christmas and Santa and, all of those things. I know my mom, who's no longer with us, um, gosh, 30 years ago, she was a director, Girl Scouts director in Knoxville, Tennessee. And they used to do a lot of charity events. And she went out and bought this beautiful, it was, I mean, 30 years ago, it was like a $500
Mm,
Santa suit. And they went out and they did all this charity work. Well, she would bring it to our family celebration in Cincinnati. And my Uncle Bobby would dress up as Santa for all of us, for the well, not for us, for our kids, my kids and the other
yeah.
kids, and he would be Santa with my grandmother as Mrs. Claus, his
Mhm.
his mom. Well, he did it for about 7 or 8 years, and he passed, unfortunately, very suddenly. So my mom asked me if I would do it, and I said, "Yeah, I'd be happy to," and it was a blast, but I
Yeah.
kept the suit, and for 2 or 3 years, my youngest son and I went to, nursing homes, and I'll tell you, there's nothing more humbling and more soul warming than to get to go in and just spend a few minutes with I mean, these were war widows, mostly
Mhm.
older women in their 80s and 90s, and
Mhm.
they would light up. They see Santa, and they would just light up. I'm gonna get choked up right now. Just,
Yeah.
how man, if you're having a hard time getting into a Christmas mood, buy a Santa costume and volunteer to go around to visit people in retirement centers or
It
hospitals. We went to Children's Hospital one
mhm.
year, and it's really, really, really rewarding, and
Well,
that's
it's what the persona creates in us.
Mhm,
Not only is it memories of childhood, I mean, for, some of these people that you're talking about that are, my grandmother, I think it was either maybe the last year or second to last year of her life. We all would get together and Santa would come to her nursing home that she was in. And one of my favorite pictures of her is her lit up exactly how you're saying. Like, she just harkened back to her childhood. Like, there is magic in seeing children, well, children, but you were exactly right that there is magic of seeing people at that age too.
mhm,
That we can find it all in us to, celebrate the spirit of the season. I think
mhm.
that's the best way of putting it. And this one person who creates magic all over the world, is he brings it, and, yeah, totally welcome it, so very cool. Well,
So, 2 quick things before we head off. You wanted to talk a little bit about the NORAD
yes, so I'm super excited. This is the 70th anniversary of NORAD, and being here in Chicago, I very much remember, uh in our station wagon, driving home on Christmas Eve, listening to WBBM, and they would have a special report come on saying that Santa was sighted at different places,
Mhm.
across the world, depending on the timing. And I think we're gonna do a bit. more in depth about this, but this
Cool.
is the 70th anniversary of NORAD. They still do it. I didn't realize that it's a volunteer situation. And the origin story of it is pretty fun. So post a little short video. So check it out. It'll be kind of bonus content. But
Nice.
yeah, so please make sure on this Christmas Eve to either go to the NORAD site if you have kids in your world, call the number and be amazed by who answers because apparently Michelle Obama volunteered to answer phone calls for 10 plus years
My
on
God.
Christmas Eve. Like, how freaking cool is that? That
Hmm.
just these incredibly famous people take time to volunteer to answer calls about Santa. So I think that may be on my bucket list to figure out how I
Nice.
can get on that list. But also, I very much respect the pagan roots of Christmas.
Solstice. Mhm.
And solstice just happened. So we welcome back the light. It's one of my favorite days of the year. I have some friends that celebrate it in various traditional ways, pagan ways. I carry that in my heart. So I just hope that all of you, we've made it through the darkness. We've come out. We're coming out into the light. The days are getting longer. So cheers to all of us. Just love how everything again has been wrapped up into one pot and it all gets celebrated this time of year. So
And for those of you in the upper Midwest, as we are, we have definitely experiencing a white Christmas. I think we've had more snow this
mhm.
December than we had all of last year.
Oh yeah.
So, um, yeah, we've got
Feels
our
very
white Christmas.
festive. I have to say, don't talk to me in January. I may be very cranky
Yeah,
in January or February if this continues on. But right now, there is some magic in the snow falling and baking cookies. I took part in this cookie exchange a couple weeks ago, and I was baking in my kitchen, watching the snow fall out my window, and being in a warm house, smells of vanilla and sugar all around me. Like it was a very situationally appropriate moment, and it was beautiful. And I hope that all of you out there that have come on this journey with us, like you have an equally wonderful and magical Christmas. I hope you find the spirit of the season in your heart. If you have kids in your world, I hope that you know you're able to create memories that last them their lifetime. My parents have done it for me, my grandparents, I mean, Steve, your Uncle Lou.
Agaloo.
Cheers to those that came before us and created magic for us because I really do think that the grandparents are the ones that will carry the tradition on and we each carry the torch forward.
So, as we get ready to leave, to sign off, two quick things before we go. The first one is you want to talk about what's coming up on our calendar?
Yeah, so actually kind of fun. Our next episode is about the week in between. What do you do? It's this weird week. What are you doing? Are you working? Are you vegging out and watching Hallmark movies? Do you turn off the Christmas music? Do you spend it all baking? I mean, it is interesting because culturally, Christmas Day was the start of the season and the 12 days of Christmas. And, I think our culture has shifted a little bit, but based on kind of school schedules, work schedules, we're kind of winding back up to like 12 days of Christmas style. But so we're going to talk about, ways to fill the gap and enjoy and keep the holiday celebrations going.
And after that, I guess our last episode will be on the Epiphany, right?
Yeah, yeah. So we're going to talk about the Epiphany and the transition of the season. So not only from what Epiphany actually means. I mean, I think the word gets thrown around, and I don't think a lot of people, current culture, understand it. So we'll talk about the origin of it, but then we'll also talk about how it plays in other calendars and events that happen in the United States and around the world. And some of my favorite holidays, I think you share it, grow out of Epiphany. So
Mhm.
it'll be pretty fun to talk about it.
Yeah,
And
like
we'll
Super Bowl, right?
yeah, exactly. Super Bowl is completely based around Epiphany and Three Kings Day. I love
Yeah,
it.
I think so. Okay, so real quick, last thing we're going to do before we do this is our quiz, which
Uh,
is pertinent to our discussion. What in the United States, what is the most popular film? And then I'll ask you about animated that features Santa Claus.
I don't know. I think in my world it's A Christmas Story, but I'm not sure.
It's
Santa Claus?
actually the Santa Claus with Tim
Yeah.
Allen. Yeah.
I
Over
actually I do like Santa Claus. Like it's a good one.
Yeah, I think that by the time I got to Santa Claus 3 and 4, but the first one was great.
Mhm.
Yeah, 74% of all Americans claim to have seen it at least once.
Wow.
A lot of people also say it's a regular annual,
Mhm.
film when they're watching. Second one is, and this is the big one. This is about the big man himself. How many presents, this is a two-parter. How many presents does Santa Claus deliver every Christmas Eve?
Oh, geez.
Now this is
Uh,
global. This isn't just the United
yeah,
States.
yeah. I don't know. I mean, 300,000,000?
Over 7 billion packages are delivered by Santa each Christmas Eve. Part two being that they average over 6,000 deliveries of Christmas gifts every second.
That's awesome. Magic.
That's logistics, man.
Yep. UPS can learn a thing or 2 from him. But
Yep.
no, it is magic. It is truly magic, and I hope magic is in your Christmas celebration. Yeah. It's been a blast doing this, and, I don't know, I feel like today is the big day, so
Mhm.
it's good stuff, but
Yep, and we'll look forward to finding out how Christmas went for everybody and for each
yeah.
other. From my side, before Julie signs off for us, I'd like to say thank you for joining us. It really has been a great time. We will look forward to doing it the next couple episodes also and wrapping it up and then looking to planning for bigger and better for next year. But I hope that if you celebrate the religious side of Christmas, that you have a very beautiful and spiritual Christmas. If you're celebrating more from the cultural end, I also hope that you have a very spiritual on a secular level, but a spiritual and lovely Christmas that you're surrounded by family and friends. If you are lonely and lonesome, please reach out. Don't let the holidays bring you heartache. Anyway, I hope your holidays are filled with love and joy.
All right. Well, that's it for this Christmas Eve episode of Christmas Culture Club. Again, thank you so much for joining us on this journey. And I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. From my heart, my family to yours, Steve, I hope you and Shannon have a
And with
beautiful
mine,
Christmas Eve.
absolutely. Yep. Merry Christmas,
Merry
everyone.
Christmas, everyone.
Bye now.